Hello everyone and welcome to episode 3 of the official New Japan Pro Wrestling English podcast. My name's Chris Charlton and alongside me back from the wilds of Australia is Michael Craven.
Hello Chris, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing very well. How was Australia?
I'd like to thank everybody I met when I was in Australia. I did 2 radio programs, 6 different podcasts, and had an amazing adventure.
Wonderful, wonderful. We had an adventure trying to get this podcast fully established in the world of the internet. But it's there.
Are we on iTunes yet?
We are almost certainly on iTunes. By the time you listen to this, you'll probably downloaded it from iTunes or Spotify even for the people that stream things.
What's Spotify?
It's a music thing. You pay a subscription or you get it for free, and then you get to listen to music, but not the music that you want.
So Spotify's making money on this podcast, but we're not?
I think we're making like a fraction of a yen.
All right, that makes sense. Like YouTube then.
Right. But also me personally is not making a fraction of a yen.
Yeah. You're being paid in fame.
Right. Yes, of course. I'm being paid in exposure, which is the currency of the new millennium, isn't it?
Well, it reminds me of one of my favorite people that I know. He says that he takes 80% cut of the salary of somebody plus another 10% to give to the company, but they get 10% in fame. It's a pretty good deal.
The company gets 10% in fame?
No, the one talent will get 10% in fame. 10%
of 10%. So you got one bit.
You're not getting very much, actually.
Right.
It's just a joke that we have about this one person, but...
Right.
I love the person to death.
No speculation. Is it Mr. GC?
No.
It's safe for me to laugh about Gino Campino because he's not here. Is he? No.
Nah, I think he's back in Australia.
Right. Gino was very cordial on our episode last week.
Oh, really?
Surprisingly so.
Huh.
Surprisingly so. We got on quite well, but I think
Did Fowler show up?
He did not.
Why?
Which was extremely fortunate on my part. I think Gino was able to sort of say, take it easy, big man. But if I was going to start causing trouble, if I asked the wrong questions.
Yeah.
Then, the rogue general would have shown up and barged in. But then again, I was very smart with where we did the podcast because it was in a very small area in the backstage of the Fukuoka Kokusai Center.
Where was it?
It was in this little kitchenette.
Oh God.
Because there's no quiet place. Okay, we're going to do a podcast backstage about, 1 hour before a New Japan event, So, there's very few quiet areas, but we have a nice cozy kitchenette.
It's kind of like this office. It's very hard to find a quiet space.
Right. Yeah,
we're a hive of activity right now with Best of Super Juniors.
And lots of things. When you were gone in Australia, everything in the office was very hectic. Because...
Yeah, 2 guys I heard.
So Flip Gordon couldn't make the trip, sadly. And Desperado. One thing that maybe, that we appreciate the fighting spirit in New Japan Pro Wrestling. But,
yes.
Taking a death match with Jun Kasai,
oh my God.
right before Best of the Super Juniors starts. And sadly a broken jaw on the part of El Desperado.
Well, if you remember 2 weeks ago,
yeah,
my pick for Best Super Juniors was Robbie Eagles.
Yeah.
And I happened to have a chance to see Robbie Eagles wrestle live in Australia, which was just outstanding. But when I was backstage, I was thinking, what should I say to Robbie? Should I say, let's wrap you up in bubble paper so you don't get hurt before Best of Super Juniors? Or should I just say, Robbie, we got to call off the match?
Yeah.
But then I realized that Robbie's so over that there would probably be a riot.
Yeah.
If that happened.
Yeah. And it's not just that, when you have people come from outside a promotion, that it's an immense honor for them to be called into Best of the Super Juniors. You know what I mean? It's like the pinnacle of your weight class. And it's, Gino made reference to it when we were talking to him last week of like getting the stamp of approval, like the blue check on Twitter. You know, it's a similar kind of thing to be called into Best of the Super Juniors. And that's because, you know, New Japan calls those people because of the work that they put in around the world, you know, and so it doesn't make sense to them to say, well, don't do this. But then you have guys like El Fantasmo who did a ladder match with David Starr in Rev Pro, won the Cruiserweight Championship. And then hopped on a plane and got to Sendai.
Well, Robbie essentially the same. He was in a match in Australia, and Robbie is one of ours long term. And I really appreciate his talent, but I was scared that he was going to get hurt.
Well, I mean, somebody of Robbie Eagles' caliber, you know, you kind of hope that, or you kind of think that he's
he's very great in the ring. Outstanding. Like I said, he's still my pick to win.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're recording this, we're about 2 hours away from night 1, 2, 3, 4. And so this will be Robbie Eagles' second match, right?
And he better not lose because he better not prove me wrong.
Right. Well, beat Rocky Romero. So, you know, my boy, Rocky Romero.
Yeah.
Like, you know, my compatriot, you know, on not compatriot, but colleague on commentary. So, you know, me, Kevin and I and Caprice as well this week rooting for Rocky Romero, but couldn't get it done. But, Rocky was great.
I didn't see the match.
You forget how good he is because he's taken, like, he's willingly worked with these younger talents.
Well,
and you forget the fact that it's not a case of like, oh, you've still got it, because like, when would you ever lose it?
Why would you chant that though for Rocky?
No, I mean, nobody did. But I mean, of course. You get the thing, you know, because I think he has been on commentary.
Yeah.
And he has been the sort of player coach and like, you know, working with Sho and Yo and, you know, being in these multi-man matches. You know, he hasn't had a singles match in New Japan for so long that you kind of forgot until he got in the, you know, I almost forgot until he got in the ring of like, oh, how good is Rocky Romero?
Well, before we talk about how good his new entrance music is, let's look back though at Rocky's career. He started off in the LA dojo.
Yep.
He was getting chops from Inoki-san.
Yeah, right.
When he was training, or at least that's what I've heard.
He was getting beaten up by Inoki, and then like, this was in the era of Antonio Inoki laying hands. You know, he's got a wonderful, you know, at some point, Rocky Romero would do this podcast and then we can get into tell the story of like Inoki laying hands on.
You're kidding.
Oh yeah.
I haven't heard that one.
Oh.
I heard about the chops.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I heard about celebrities dropping by the old LA dojo just at random times.
Just to beat them up.
Yeah.
And see, but that was the thing that he's told me of like, it's almost like all of that stuff comes in by osmosis then, you know, of being beaten up in that dojo. And like, you think the people that came through there, you know, he was in the same class with like guys like Samoa Joe or Bryan Danielson, Carl Anderson, Prince Devitt was there at the time. You know, Shinsuke, of course, and, Lyoto Machida, you know, who went on to be the great star in the UFC. So, I mean, there's a lot there, learning by osmosis and like, you know, I mean, he's so well traveled and has learned so much and has taught so much. And you see that with like Sho and Yo as well, right? And, yeah, I don't know. I was talking to people around here like the last few days. Everybody has been, oh my God, like Sho at the moment, 0-2.
Yes.
Not the best track records, but you know, he kind of got the draw of death, right? Because like you look at that and it's like match 1, Shingo. Nobody's beaten Shingo.
No.
And match 2, Dragon Lee. So you've gone straight from like the guy that's nobody's beaten.
Well, I hate to say it. I'm not really allowed to say this, but isn't Shingo on the heavy side of the juniors? I can see him going to G1 possibly after he made weight. Super Juniors. He made weight.
I mean, there's people in there where there's a few people in there where you go, couldn't he do both? Maybe, you know. And
Brody King.
Brody King's not in the tournament, right?
No, but I know he's around though.
He's on there, yeah. But you know, Will Ospreay as well. Right?
Very true.
No, and I think we talked about it before, right? Nobody's done it in the same calendar year.
Yeah.
Right. Milano went from 1 year to the next. And so did Prince Devitt. He went from 1 year to the next, but like nobody's done, New Japan Cup, Best of the Super Juniors and G1 all in the space of the same 12 months. You know, Will Ospreay could do it. I'm sure he wants to do it. That's why, there was an interview that went up with him, right? Where he's like, I want one belt in one hand, one belt in the other hand.
That would be amazing, actually.
Yeah.
However, that would deny my pick, winning the best of Super Juniors.
Robbie Eagles, winning the best of the Super Juniors. But I think, Robbie Eagles, one of the debutants. Like, there's now 6 debutants. Right?
Yeah.
Because Flip Gordon was going to debut, couldn't make it. So Ren Narita took his place.
Yes.
Ren Narita is like, obviously he's a debutant. And, then you had, in place of El Desperado, you had Douki, who that was, when the first, the name comes out, you're like, who?
Well, I was in Australia following her on Twitter, and it's like, who?
Yeah.
It was my exact words. And they're like, is El Desperado wearing a different mask?
Because there's kind of I don't know, there's kind of a similarity,
Yeah.
Douki was calling Desperado Taichi was El Jefe, like, but, Desperado, but the Nihamano, like that kind of thing. There's, I don't know, we're finding everything out with Douki match by match.
Yes.
I think like there was a few little bits, and when I saw this, I was like, okay, well, first of all, I have to tear up my notes that I'd made for Desperado and then go out and see what we can see for Douki, which was very limited, because he did, Toryumon in Mexico was his in, and then he worked around the Mexican indies and then came bit by bit. So he wrestled in Kaintai Dojo and a little bit of Michinoku Pro.
Yes.
And, obviously those aren't anywhere near the visibility of the New Japan. So like there was video there, but it was kind of old. It was like over, smaller places. And so it was very difficult to figure out, how's this guy gonna translate? There's a little bit of El Desperado. I can see the link. In there. And you see
it could be Despy in disguise.
No. I know. Unless he's managed to wire his jaw shut and managed to keep going, which probably still isn't very smart. But, I think you see the Taichi in him.
Yes.
And, in just the sort of viciousness. But you see something really very different. And like, I think that's what's really interesting about.
Well, even though he's not the best of Super Juniors, you just touched base with Taichi. I'm actually surprised how more vicious this past few months Taichi's become. He seems more ruthless, more focused. Yeah,
maybe. I think once like the Ishii match, and then, when you see the buttons pushed in Taichi of like, I have a specific chip in my shoulder for this particular reason, then you see him move in a certain way. And I think like Douki, like this massive chip on the shoulder, and like, reading what he's said to, to the websites here of like the idea of the New Japan system, the system that we have here where, okay, it's, an extremely tough, demanding system, extremely rigorous. But at the same time, Douki's point is, well, you've got a roof over your head.
Yeah.
You've got meals every day. And yet here was Douki at age 18, straight out of high school, went on his own all the way to Mexico. Didn't know anybody, didn't know anything. Like Milano Collection hooked him up with Taichi.
Yes.
And that was it, and so from there, like 10 years in, really sort of fighting for every meal that he had. That's a really sort of interesting story, but it's not a rags to riches thing. It's like him going, no, I want to like tear down everything. And that sort of made him this interesting character. But
sounds like Douki has a new fan.
Yeah, I know. I'm a fan of Douki, and I'm a fan of Show. Like the Show has been, it sounds cheesy, but like show stealer.
Yes.
For sure. And he's one of those, I think when we were sitting at ringside at Sendai, and, he's got his new entrance music now to show.
I haven't heard it yet. So,
oh, no, really?
Like I said, I'm going to be catching up probably tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah.
I just got back from Australia. I'm going to be catching up on all the shows that I missed.
Yeah. But you sort of hear that, and entrances are part of the package.
Of course.
But they're, important in a way because the work gets done in the ring.
Yeah.
But, when you can equate music to a certain guy, and you sort of imagine the moments that come along with it.
Well, just the first few bars of a song, that's when you
I know. I mean, it was, maybe we can't reference other companies, but like when you hear a certain glass break or you hear a certain guitar squeal, like for an American fan or for fans here, when that coin drops and a card comes out, it's like, that's kind of iconic. And it's the sort of, he's got like a chiptune riff now. And it's like, I can imagine that music playing when he wins I get it. Maybe not even the junior heavyweight title, but the heavyweight championship.
A good song, so critical. I'm trying to think of some of the good songs we have right now. God's new song, for example. Rocky's new song. Yeah. It's amazingly catchy, Rocky's new song.
Rocky's got,
it gets in your head and you just can't get out of your head.
Yeah, exactly.
These are good songs.
Yeah. So, show's been tremendous. And I think I've said it for a while. And Shingo is my pick for best of the Super Juniors. And, Kevin will laugh at me and say, I've got a man crush on Shingo Takagi. But,
well, I think you got a man crush on Douki now.
But, if right now belongs to Shingo, the future is all on Sho. But that makes me think, is Yo gonna compete in that scenario as well? And that's something interesting down the road. Is it Sho said he kind of he's constantly thinking of ways to further himself, whereas Yo is thinking of ways to further the team. Sho, Jay White, Ren Narita, further down the road.
Yes.
Sho Umino.
Oh, yes.
These sort of guys that are at the beginning of their journeys almost, or coming into their prime now. And then you look at someone like Okada, who is at the very top and yet it's still only 31, right? Hiromu, when he comes back, is going to be at the top or very, very top. And he is only 30 years old, barely 30, right? There's all of these guys that would be, I think when the history books get written in Japan, we would talk about these guys as being the cornerstones of Reiwa Progress.
Oh, Reiwa era.
The Reiwa
new era.
The new era coming now.
Well, I was born in Showa.
Yes,
I was. Showa 49. When were you born? So Showa 49.
Showa 83.
Oh, you're so young.
Yeah. So, to explain, I think a lot of it would come out on social media.
Well, let's
this is the last show of Heisei. This is the first show of Reiwa, and everybody go, this week, instead of having a word of the week, let's explain something that's an important concept in Japan. The years. And how to understand the years. Yeah. So before we go into talking more about the different eras, why don't you explain about the different eras and how years are measured in Japan? Well, I mean, we still in Japan use traditional years, right? But there's also, depending on who you're talking to, what's written where, especially when you're having to write formal applications or things like that, then you don't necessarily use the Roman calendar or the traditional, whatever you call it, the common era that we use now. But instead, we talk about the eras in terms of who is the Japanese emperor at the time.
So, for example, I'm born in Showa 49. What does that mean?
Showa 49 was Showa was the era of Hirohito, right?
Yes.
So, he was the emperor from, let's do the math, 1920 something or other.
He was the wartime emperor.
Through the war, and then, on past that, under the new constitution, and blah, blah, blah. And so then Hirohito passes away, and then the next era comes in. And so it's not that Hirohito was the emperor, but the era was called Showa, right?
So it's called Showa because the first year of his reign is when Showa 1 started.
Yeah.
And the final year of his reign is when Showa ended. And then the next emperor, the Heisei era, begins.
Yeah.
And we go back to year 1 again.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. And so the Heisei emperor, like, he abdicated.
Yes.
And now we have a new emperor. So we've started from Reiwa. So it's not some people might get confused and think like that the name of the emperor is the name of the era.
No.
That's not quite right? There's a whole,
process.
Yeah, right. And, it's very political perhaps. And that's probably one thing we probably don't want to be on the scope of a pro wrestling podcast. But, so we've settled on like, Reiwa, which has, it's a little bit ambiguous in the meaning. So like lots of people are talking about what that might mean. Again, that's not within our scope or pay grade.
With a Japanese accent, it's quite interesting because R and L is very difficult for Japanese. So I was really surprised they chose an R sound.
But it was very, it was confusing, I think, as well to some of the foreign journalists that were covering at the time.
Well, it's like karaoke, Reiwa.
Yeah, well, I think as well, like the official definition.
Yes.
The official translation didn't get out until later. Because I think as well, there was like ambiguity, because there's so much ambiguity within the characters, right? There's so many ways that you could read it. And so that was one of the news stories at the time where like a lot of it, you can read Reiwa very, very negatively. Right. And so people were sort of writing these think pieces, the negative, and then the official translation, no, it means this other thing, right? It means beautiful harmony. But like a lot of like the foreign journalists that just heard Reiwa and didn't see the characters because like Rei, even like the kanji is very close, right? They could be like, as in like, cooling something. So it's a lot of people thought, cool Japan.
Yeah, I remember hearing that.
Yeah, so that wasn't quite the case. But
so let's go back to Showa very quickly. So New Japan has now had 3 different eras. And let's just start off the beginning of Showa. I recall the first big feud was Tigerjeet Singh versus Inoki. But at that time, Inoki wasn't alone because he had Seiji Sakaguchi and Strong Kobayashi.
Well, Strong Kobayashi was interesting because he was like the first invader from another like company, right? From IWE, which was like that is a whole topic unto itself. But like IWE was a tremendously innovative product at the time, right? But yeah, I mean, when we talk about wrestling in Japan, we very often, like lots of people talk about Showa pro wrestling.
Yes.
Like the Showa era of wrestling and the Heisei era of wrestling, they have very different feels.
Well, the mentality of Japanese was a lot different at that time also too, because after being defeated in the war, the yen was stuck at $1 equal 360 yen.
Wow.
And the currency had just changed into a floating currency finally. Yeah. So a lot of Japanese would live vicariously through wrestlers.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, that was literally all it was. You would go to a wrestling card, it would be Japanese guy, foreign guy, Japanese guy, foreign guy, Japanese guy, foreign guy. And so like, and it would make you, I mean, Rikidozan versus the Destroyer, right? In what, 65, 66 maybe?
God, that's
83% share, right? On TV.
Yes.
That's like 83% of houses in this country that had a television set were watching that match, right?
Yes.
And so, but I mean, there was a lot of sort of national identity and finding the national identity again. But you saw, because the Showa era was kind of long, you saw like a transition during that.
New Japan, Inoki literally picked up the baton that Rikidozan had left.
Yeah.
I couldn't say it was really passed. I'd say it was more just picked up.
I mean, in different senses, right? Because, one of those sort of initial sort of interesting rivalries in New Japan, it was something that I was watching recently on World was like Kintaro Oki, right? And like Oki, who was a Korean guy.
Yes. And
like so devoted to Rikidozan that he made the trip by himself. He'd like stowed away on a fishing boat to get to Japan, got arrested on site. And then when he got out of jail, Rikidozan heard about him, trained him or whatever. And so, him and Inoki were kind of tight. But when Inoki then left after Rikidozan died, a few years after he died and then started New Japan, like Oki came into New Japan with this thing of like, you're supposed to be devoted to Rikidozan and JWA, but yet this is New Japan Pro Wrestling. Like you're erasing what had come before. So there was that sort of interesting, I think there was like lots of loyalty in that era, and like one of the themes of like Showa wrestling was kind of bitterness a little bit in a sense.
But loyalty is something that I've noticed with our company.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Or with New Japan, loyalty with our partners, no matter what. When we make a partnership with somebody, we're incredibly loyal.
Yeah.
We don't break relationships very easy. So it's very, very much a national characteristic of Japanese.
But I think as well, like this
but
kind
the bitterness
of thing,
is your mention.
the bitterness, yeah, because I think like in Oki, almost part of that, the concept of strong style and the concept of the king of sports was, somebody like Inoki thinking, you can't tear down pro wrestling now that this is, it's like a chip on the shoulder kind of thing. And a lot, maybe not so much Inoki, but like you look at other figures from that era, somebody like, someone like Baba, someone
John
like,
Baba,
Tenryu as well, right? Guys that came from other sports. And perhaps like that's somewhat similar to the West as well. People that came from American football, people that came from baseball, people that came from sumo, that couldn't do those sports anymore. Right?
Yep.
For whatever reason, right?
Of course.
And Baba had injuries and that sent him into pro wrestling, right? So there was a sense of perhaps I've had this prior life taken away from me and now I'm in this, and they're not necessarily a fan of pro wrestling until they were in it. And it sort of made a sort of a gritty sort of, violence to a lot of what they were doing. But you see that especially with Tenryu, right? Whereas, like, when that transitions into Heisei, now you have people that grew up with Tenryu.
Before we go to Heisei, though, I think one of the big transitions probably was Satoru Sayama becoming Tiger Mask. Because that was really the game changer. So when I was watching New Japan, I always remember my father would record Tiger Mask anime.
Yeah.
And you're capturing children. So you're getting out of the bitterness towards the end of Showa, and you're entering into Heisei.
Yeah.
But now you have this cartoon that's getting painted on the hearts on all children.
Yeah.
Tiger Mask.
Yeah.
And it's kind of ending the bitterness and bringing a sweetness and bringing the rise of the junior division at the same time.
Yeah, right. Exactly, right? Yeah. And it's so important to have like the children that were watching then, the kids that were, and like, back then New Japan was prime time. So a lot of kids like watching that and then getting into the wrestling business during Heisei. So like
after school, you have the cartoon, Tiger Mask anime, and then primetime television, you have wrestling to watch with the family.
Yeah, right. So you had guys like, the Three Musketeers, Muto Chono Hashimoto.
Yes.
People that had watched wrestling and had watched all of those guys, taken that in. Now I love that. I'm going to be a pro wrestler. So it's a very different mindset for a lot of those guys, I think.
Well, they're embracing without the bitterness.
Right.
And they're focusing more on the strong style at that point, I think.
But their version of it.
Their version of
it, like, which wasn't perhaps a bitter style of it.
No,
but
not at all.
Was like, I want to live up to that that sort of aspect of it. And like, I think Heisei started with that interesting, like clash, the stylistic clash in the 90s where you had, strong style in New Japan, then you had King's Road in All Japan, which was kind of very different. I think like that was where you saw maybe wrestling in Japan develop into a medium instead of a genre.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where I think like, especially in the early stages of wrestling in 70s and the 80s, it was very influenced by the American product.
See, the thing though is what a lot of people always say, New Japan is a niche product, but actually it was a nationwide loved sport.
Yeah. And
never a niche.
But it was all of those New Japan, All Japan, IWE as well were very heavily influenced by the foreigners that were there at the time.
Well, who were they? They were Abdullah the Butcher, Stan Hansen, the British Bulldogs.
Right. So you saw those guys really influence that style. And then in the Heisei period and in the 90s, you saw that sort of become more of its own thing, I think, within Japan. But it makes me think like, okay, so now what is Reiwa Pro Wrestling?
Well, I think the New Musketeers, as they were dubbed, first, before we go into Reiwa, we should touch base a little bit with Tanahashi, Shibata, and Nakamura, and how they've influenced who might be our future.
Yeah. I think you have guys, I think you're going to see people who follow different people. That sounds terrible, right?
Yeah.
People who follow different guys in the Heisei era will set them into different paths, because I think you are going to have the guys that followed Tanahashi, and you look at like a Tanahashi and there's a through line, right? Where Tanahashi came from Muto, it's like Fujinami begot, it's like reading the Bible, right? So Fujinami begot Muto, and Muto begot Tanahashi, and Tanahashi begot Sho, and like, so there's that line. Or like Chono begot Tetsuya Naito.
It's almost like a lineage of kings.
Right. But then also you have somebody like Kota Ibushi, who was he was a fan of New Japan at the time.
Yes.
But he didn't take to a dojo style of training and trained himself, because his thinking was, if I go to the New Japan dojo, then I will do everything exactly like a New Japan guy, and I won't be who Kota Ibushi is.
Recently, I've been watching a lot of Game of Thrones, especially with the new season, and Kota Ibushi kind of reminds me of Jon Snow. He doesn't really know anything, but eventually, he's going to be king.
I think it does a disservice. Well, I think Kota Ibushi knows a lot about professional wrestling. I don't think he knows much about like getting from town to town, remembering his passport. So I think we saw Heisei Pro Wrestling become more creative, and I think Reiwa more creative again. It was Show's. I listened to Show's podcast recently.
Yes,
and he was talking about coming into Best of the Super Juniors, where he thought that the key for him is to not compare junior and heavyweight, and we've kind of lapsed into it during this podcast, talking about, guys that could be junior, guys that could be heavyweight. And he was like, what we need to do is make something completely different and of its own, and make junior, through things like Best of the Super Junior, make something that's very different. I think that's going to fall to this new generation of guys, is to create something that's new. So yeah, so much exciting stuff to come through Reiwa. But perhaps we've gone a little bit long on the history side of things this week. But if it is something that the people listening want to hear more of, then do reach out. In fact, I know hopefully we'll have a couple of guests coming over the next few weeks of the podcast, but this is still sort of the embryonic stages of something that we're doing with this. So I want to hear from as many people as possible in terms of what, they want us to talk about. If you send any questions, that's not necessarily, somebody will read everything that gets sent, right? In terms of questions and things. Maybe we might not get to it for a little while, but we'll get to something originally, eventually, if it's a cool talking point. So do reach out in the comments that are underneath. Now we have podcast posts on the website, so put those in there, or get to us on Twitter. I'm at ReasonJP, at NJPW Global.
Eventually, I will be on Twitter, which I don't really want to be.
Oh, come on now.
My previous job, I had no SNS. For 21 years, I've managed to avoid SNS. Mm-hmm. And now I might have an official Twitter account.
Yeah.
If I can avoid it, I won't. But that reminds me, one of the most important things right now is Southern Showdown. We have 2 shows, one in Melbourne, one in Sydney. Meet and greets are going to be announced. Hopefully, by the time you hear this podcast, they will have already been announced. The card is outstanding, and I encourage all of our Australian fans to attend live to show that you represent, you support New Japan. G1 in Dallas. Tickets are on sale now. We warmly welcome you to attend. And finally,
Royal Quest as well. Yeah. This is where we go down the line. So it worked well in Dontaku because we had like Rocky was next to Kevin.
Yes.
And then it was Gino and then it was me. So like Kevin would do this thing of like New Japan all the way around the world. And so like, the American guy, the Australian guy.
Everything all represented.
Guy. Exactly right. It was almost as if it was planned that way. Yes, Royal Quest in the copy box, August 31st. And that's one of those things where like, I know like, you know what I mean?
Chris.
Southern Showdown is coming up right around the corner. So you kind of have to promote to everything in chronological order. But I'm sure we're going to have like big news about Royal Quest like really soon as well.
Very soon. Yeah. Well, with Southern Showdown, one of the things is I'm able to get the referees, the announcers. It's going to be a full on New Japan production. For Royal Quest, I have one request right now, Chris.
Yeah.
Can I have you on that show?
I would love to be on that show.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, I will be. You can put me in the. I am in the advert, aren't I? It's good, isn't it? It's good, isn't it? Yes. So all of that information, all of that good stuff. NJPW1972.com. We want to urge people to go to the website because so much good stuff has been on the website of late.
Recently, a lot of new English content as well.
Yeah. So much good stuff. I mean, like, there's sort of previews at a glance, previews for every single Best of the Super Juniors card are going up there every single day. So many interviews. We had, Lance Archer had a great interview on there. Shingo Takagi had a great interview on there. Doki and, Taichi, Will Ospreay. So much like really great stuff that you can only get, by looking at the website. So njpw1972.com.
And I guess we're going to sign off now. So in the meantime and in between time, that's it for the New Japan podcast this week.
Gokigenyo. Sayonara.